Hey everybody, welcome back to the Quest for the Bestest. It's the podcast where us four backlog boys, my name is Timo, and I'm joined of course by Abram, Tucker, and Tanner, are dissecting the Best Picture winners one by one, picking them out of a great big pot of movies and figuring out where they rank against each other on our list of the Best Picture winners. That's right, it's the Quest for the Bestest. That's what you tuned into, and today we are talking about the movie that won 1977's Oscars, which would be 1976, Rocky, directed by John G. Avildsen, written by Sylvester Stallone, also happens to be the main character. We're going to get into it, I think.
Believe it or not.
Believe it or not, we will be talking about that film quite a lot on this episode. It's a real knockout film. But before we have to talk about Rocky, we're going to revisit last week, and we talked about 12 Years a Slave from 2013. We thought it was not just pretty good. We thought it was very good. In fact, we gave it an average score of 9.3, which made it rocket to the top of our list. Not quite the top, but top 10. So it landed 6th out of 48 movies, which, man.
That's high up there.
That is really high up there. And that movie, very good. Very good. But we're not talking about that anymore. It's done. It's settled. Now we get to have a little bit of a heavyweight battle about Rocky.
We can talk about it for a little bit more, reading our highlighted comment from 12 Years a Slave from last week, which of course comes from John Tor 11, who says that this was a disturbing film to watch. Yeah, I agree. It's crazy that this was only 150 plus years ago when this was a reality, which is also crazy.
Important to bring
amazing
out.
Performances all around. 7.8 out of 10 for him.
There you go. There you have it.
Short comment. Short and pithy. Thank you, John Tor.
Yes.
So,
Not like this, though.
Don't piss your pants.
We're going to go the distance with Rocky. We're going to go an all-out slugfest, maybe.
Can I request that I give the summary of this film? And
it is yours. It is yours to give.
So this movie is about Mary Sue Rocky Balboa in his boxing match against Apollo Creed. That is the entirety of the film, but he's also a collection agent for the mob. He also has a loving relationship with a woman that begins in a very creepy manner in his apartment. So there's a lot to talk about this film, but also very little to say about it. And I think that's why I think this movie is awesome. I think Rocky is awesome. I think this movie is hype as hell and a ton of fun to watch, but I have no clue how this won Best Picture. Because certainly is 2 hours worth of material here, and 65% of it leads nowhere and means nothing. So I don't really know how to reconcile all these facts about Rocky, but I think it's a lot of fun, very charismatic film.
Sure.
Rocky is a fascinating one in the lineage of Best Pictures because we often end up talking about movies, that are important because they won Best Picture, but often not much else. You talk about Schindler's List, there are Forrest Gump, there are certainly outliers, but Rocky stands in the echelon of one of those pop culture movies. That what the heck? It also won Best Picture. How'd that happen? And honestly, I don't know. There's also a lot of famous movies from this year that would have felt more at home in the lineage of Best Pictures. But also, I think this movie's phenomenal. I think this is one of the best character study films. Maybe it's a little weirdly paced, maybe it's a little weirdly structured, but it's so different and so interesting. I love this film, and I'm very happy it won the Best Picture because it gives us this really interesting side tangent of a really popular, famous film that we get to talk about in the Quest for the Bestest.
Yeah.
True. I mean, the Academy is always debating. There's always every Oscar season it comes up, do we have the popular award? And in 1977, the popular award was the Best Picture award because Rocky was the blockbuster of the year. And I think the film feels like a blockbuster, like some popcorn cinema. But man, if popcorn cinema exists, I need to be allowed to have fun while I watch it. And that I did when I'm watching Rocky. You know, you really feel him, the soundtrack, it's an iconic movie. And I think that's my distillation of it all. I think it's a little weird as a Best Picture, but just as a film, greatly enjoyable, a lot of fun to watch, a lot of fun to see what's happening. And I mean, I think Sylvester Stallone he's pretty damn good as Rocky, if I'm going to go out on a limb and say that there. Tanner, I think you are our last
He should come back in that role.
Oh, yeah, that'd be really interesting.
I hope they make a sequel.
I hope they make a spin-off series that follows Apollo Creed's son. That's what I want to watch.
But I hope there's 4 core entries before that happens.
I actually wish there was 6 core entries before that. One of which follows Rocky Balboa's son.
Boy, do I have
Besides
news for you.
What? But besides that point, I think the very first installment, Rocky, is a very good film. I think there's a lot of great points in here. You all raise great points about how this is like it feels like a little offbeat little step for the Best Picture lineage, but a good offbeat little step. You know, it is a small budget character study as I will allude to in the many pieces of trivia about this. You know, this has been installed in like the pop culture criterion of film. And by that measure, there's going to be a lot of like interviews about it where people say interesting things. So I have a lot of interesting trivia about this, and I have a lot of things to say about the core content of the film as well. But boys, let's just get into it.
Why not?
Amen. Who's brave enough to go first? I think Abram, you were about.
I'm going to be brave enough to go first because.
Okay.
Throw that first punch, if you will.
I genuinely did not expect it to be as positive of an opening salvo out of the show as it was. And so my question is, what do you think about it's more of a question than a statement.
Okay.
What do you think about the content of the film from a plot perspective? Because I think the biggest issue with this movie is that it's a lot of happenstance, there's a lot of picked up and dropped plot threads. And for me, it doesn't take away from how fun the movie is, but I think there's a huge dichotomy here between the fun factor of Rocky and the sort of quality of storytelling in Rocky.
Okay.
It's interesting because we come into this film and you come out gate swinging. That's not a fucking term, but you come out swinging and excited and talking about how hyped you find this movie. And I think that's true from a certain perspective, but when I go into this movie, it's been years and years since I've seen it, didn't like it as much the first time. I'm expecting for it to be just, a boxing movie with some boxing action and this guy who's dealing with some stuff in between. But what I found and why I think this movie works as strongly as it does and ends up, spoiler alert, in one of my favorite Best Picture winners that we've seen, is because it focuses, it takes the focus so much away from what are those hype segments. I think the movie works best when it's talking about Rocky as a person, his relationship to his neighborhood and his history and the characters around him who have all impacted him in different ways. And it's such a rich and interesting character study that, like real life, things just ebb and flow. Things impact him in small ways. And you get a lot of sequences that are devoid of hype, that are just focused on this guy who he's a bum. That's how everyone refers to him as. Everyone's insulting him. Everything's going wrong in his life. He's kind of just a schmuck and he knows it. And it's a really interesting position to put a character, the ultimate underdog, in, that you instantly connect to this guy. You know exactly who he is. It's all laid out on the table and you get to a really raw character study throughout the film that culminates in a really hype thing. I think that's why this movie works so well, is it takes the focus away from those action sequences and of boxing and puts it on the character so you're able to learn who he is, so you feel a lot more emotional, pumped up, and engrossed when he pulls the ultimate underdog move and beats the heavyweight champion of the world.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I do, Abram, I'm going to take one of your points and extrapolate what I think you're going to say about this. Because you said happenstance. And this movie really only gets going plot-wise because out of a hat, Apollo Creed says, this Rocky Balboa guy, he's the guy that I want to fight. And
it's got a good sounding name.
Yeah, the Italian Stallion,
It's a good name. It's a good name.
It is a good name. But, I mean, I guess you're right. That is just, like, a thing that happens in the story to kickstart it. But at the same time, like, I can look past it. Look past the coincidence of just Apollo Creed picking this out. Because I think it serves like the character dichotomy that Apollo Creed and Rocky Balboa have. Rocky Balboa he's a low class upstart guy. He's very reserved. He doesn't let on to a lot of people what he really thinks, who he really is, his true inner thoughts. And Apollo Creed is this larger than life, boisterous, boasting Muhammad Ali stand-in essentially. And you have these two guys thrown into a ring together, and they don't interact a lot throughout the entire film, but the character moments that you get from either of them sort of stand in for those character interactions and work to build up both of them.
I find that if this is the boxing movie genre certainly exists. For a boxing movie, this really doesn't have that much boxing in it. There's a fight at the beginning.
my
There's
point exactly.
A lot of training, and then our final fight at the end. And that's an interesting way to take the direction of the film, at least in the plotting of it. And I think that by and large it works. I think the film kind of slows a little bit right before we get to the final montage, the famous one. And so, it's just kind of trying to figure out where it is, how to situate itself in those moments before really diving back into the boxing element when you're dealing with the story with your romance subplot, or your B story. Really, it's the B story of the film, and themes of home life in what is it, Philadelphia?
Yes.
So yeah, I
Very
think
clearly. They mention that quite often.
yeah, I know. I was just trying to make sure I didn't say the wrong thing. But to me, what's almost most interesting about the film, in a similar way to The French Connection, is the portrayal of the city. We have the city is almost a real character, where they are and just how everything looks and feels to me is a lot of what kind of grabbed me and was interesting to me as we watched, and to see how Rocky, interacts with his city, not just, the literal landscapes, but the people and the neighbors and all of that, which was interesting to me. Maybe because the plot in the middle of the movie was not pulling me along super strongly, I think. Until I know it's coming, so I'm like, yes, let's get to this training montage. Let's get to Rocky having a fight. So I'm watching it and I'm looking for it, but it's not my central, I guess, area of focus in the film. During the middle, I think the beginning and the end are really great, and they set up and pay off a lot of really good stuff. But maybe in the middle, like it plot-wise is a little less interesting, for lack of a better word, than the bookends, I guess.
Sure.
Yeah, I see where you guys are coming from, and I really have a lot of fun with basically every sequence of the movie. I just find myself, Timo, to your point about setups and payoffs, there are a lot in terms of Rocky himself, in terms of his relationship with Mickey, in terms of the relationship with the people around him as he goes up against Creed. But I find that there's a lot of threads that are left hanging in an unsatisfactory way. So Apollo Creed himself, for instance, ends up feeling really flat and like he's completely absent from the movie. And that's largely the intent. I like the scene where you see that one of Apollo Creed's guys is watching TV as Rocky is working out in the ice box, right? Mm-hmm. So I think that stuff is great, and it says something about his character that he isn't there. But at the same time, I just feel like the antagonist of the film is missing. And then we've got interesting side characters like Gazzo, who is employing Rocky illicitly, but ultimately that doesn't get fleshed out at all. The relationship with Adrian and Paulie is complex and dynamic, but the relationship of Adrian and Rocky's relationship kind of happens off screen. We go from the really uncomfortable and awkward first date that feels a little bit assault-esque to
the end of it.
Yeah, to her being very comfortable around him. I just feel like there's all of so many great scenes, but the connective tissue for me is just missing.
The one thing interesting that you say about Apollo Creed, and I think it extends to the entire cast of supporting characters, is that everyone in the movie essentially excited for Rocky, is they are pretty one note. I mean, they have their own complexities. They don't necessarily have a ton of backstory, but I think the reason that I don't think that's necessarily a detriment to the film, and why subsequently I don't think those dropped plot threads related to them are a huge problem, is because they are very distinct characters. They're not boring side characters. They fill their roles, and they all impact Rocky, who this movie is very clearly through the eyes of in different ways. You get to know his relationship with each of them, you know what he's thinking about who they are and how they've impacted him, and that's what I'm looking for in this film. And I think maybe it's underserving the side characters a little bit, but I think from the perspective of the guy who wrote this script is playing the main character, and it's very clearly through his eyes, he knew exactly what this movie, for my opinion, should be, and focused really hard on this. This movie feels very focused on who Rocky is as a person. And while that might leave some plot threads hanging or other things, sort of dissolved in the background, in the end, I don't think that's necessarily too important, because when you're looking at what this film is trying to do and knows what it does best, is focusing on Rocky. And it does that incredibly well. And again, it's one of my favorite Best Picture winners.
I mean, we said it before that this is a character study, and so I definitely think about the film through the lens of character a lot more. I've come to realize in the last month or so that I'm like a plot movie viewer. I really watch movies for like what happens and not really what happens to the characters. But in this case, I was able to get in and really think about Rocky's development as a character and to see where he goes, how he starts the film and how he ends the film. I had to think a little bit about it. I don't think Rocky's arc is the most obvious arc ever, but I think it's there and I think it works in its subtlety. I think it actually is quite a subtle arc where he changes, but I like it for what it does to him and how he changes by the end of the film after he ties with Apollo Creed.
Well, hang on. I think he loses, doesn't he? He loses by decision.
He loses by decision,
by
but
technicality, yeah.
Yeah.
But physically, he tied because he went the distance. I don't know. I wasn't quoting anyone there, but that's the idea of the film.
well, I think that line is used.
I do want to talk about the sort of one and the sameness of Rocky Balboa and Sylvester Stallone, because it is interesting for this being a Best Picture winner, the highest award the Academy of Film Arts and Sciences can award, that it is such a focused character study that started from like a poor guy struggling actor, because that's what Sylvester Stallone was. The bulk of my trivia is I just want to like rattle off some things about like how this movie sort of came to be. So there's two producers, Erwin Winkler and Robert Chartoff, who were interested in the script. They had met with Sylvester Stallone during an audition or something like that, because up until this moment, Sylvester Stallone was like, he had been in like one kind of famous movie, and then he was like a bit character or an extra and other stuff. But he wrote the script for Rocky as sort of like an allegory for his own life as a struggling actor. He was a struggling boxer. And he had $106 in his bank account, no car, and he had just sold his dog for $50 so he could like pay rent.
Holy shit! Wow. That's just about as bottom of the barrel in terms of financials that one can get.
He was making like $30 a week as an usher, essentially, is what he was doing. But these producers got interested, and they're like, "We'll pay you to use your script." And he's like, I will sell the script to you, but I have to be Rocky. There's no other. I'm not selling it to you if I'm not Rocky. And I think that dedication to the character comes across very, very well. What else? Okay, so they take it to United Artists. They're like, okay, United Artists is like, all right, we'll give this a $2 million budget. We'll attach somebody like Robert Redford or something like that. And they're like, no, this guy won't sell the script unless he plays the main character. And like, this fucking guy, he's green behind the ears actor. He's been in like one movie. And they're like, that's what he fucking said. So they cut the budget from $2 million to $1 million and said to these two producers, if it goes even a cent over budget, it's coming out of yours two's pockets. And
Wow.
it did. It went $100,000 over budget. So those two producers had to mortgage their house to cover the rest of that cost.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah. And then this went on to be the highest grossing film of 1976. And if you remember, the dog that I brought up that Sylvester Stallone had to sell for $50, that dog was actually Butkus.
Ah.
He bought him back and put him in the movie. That dog, Butkus, is actually Sylvester Stallone's
Was the dog's name actually Butkus?
As far as I can tell,
Fucking
yes.
better be, because that's the greatest goddamn dog name I've ever heard in my life.
Yes, but aside from all that rambly backstory for the film, the main point is that Rocky Balboa is entirely a creation of Sylvester Stallone. He is tied intrinsically to this character as an actor, and that comes across very, very well.
I think that he is fantastic in the movie. I think he's like a big piece of brick. He's very unflinching and very like plain in his delivery, but there's a lot of nuance to what he's saying and what he says in spite of that. Mm-hmm. And in spite of him being this enormous oaf, he literally, every line of dialogue is so fantastic when delivered by him, mm-hmm. in his intonation, with his mannerisms. I think that this is one of the film performances. It is fantastic. Did he win? I don't want to rush to that segment of the show yet.
Oh, okay, all right.
Let's rush to it. Let's get it over.
Let's rush to
actor?
it. He should have. I usually have it pulled up, but hang on, I'm getting it pulled up right here. Everyone, keep your britches on.
I would agree with you,
Abram.
Win.
He was nominated.
That's too bad, but the nomination is certainly well deserved. I think his acting is so convincing as Rocky Balboa that I really, he plays the character and embodies it 100%, even more than 100%, and so.
Yeah.
When I watch it, I just see Rocky. I don't even think about seeing Sylvester. I'm like, why is he so dumb? And I'm like, but he's just playing this character. I was like, I think the acting really sells a lot of what goes on plot wise and character wise with Rocky. I mean that seems kind of obvious as a point of praise, but it needs to be said.
I certainly agree. And I think that's what most surprised me about this film and why I connected to it so deeply is that performance and everything that goes into it from the small nuances, which is why I kind of flinched a little bit when you said that he was like a brick and really solid. I think more you meant like, I don't know, personality-wise or something, but is that this guy is so, on a granular level, nuanced. I mean, he has a really interesting backstory with how he's relating to everyone in his life, and everyone always told him he couldn't do it, and he kind of internalized that over time, but he still got that spark of passion in him that takes him on to be the ultimate underdog. But then you look at the performance and the bobbing he's always doing when he's like just trying to stand around an office or whatever. He's got those little ticks. He's always delivering his lines in really iconic ways.
Like the rubber ball that he has, I'm like, this might be true or not, but I'm like, it's to help with like hand-eye coordination. When he's walking down the street and he's bouncing the rubber ball, I'm like, that might be
It's even just those little things, like the fact that he has that rubber ball, like his apartment is so decked out in interesting ways with the mattress tied around the pole, and he's got two turtles that he just loves like immensely.
Link.
He's such a fascinating character. He says words I've never heard before, but they work so naturally coming out of his mouth that and maybe this is just because I connected so much to the character, I didn't care if the scenes got slow. I didn't really care if plot threads in the background were dropped because all I cared about in the moment was how this guy is doing, how his relationships are progressing, and where is he going? What's he thinking? Like, I was so focused on that character that all the sort of larger scale film structure things didn't really affect me. Well, I do think they're done very well. Any of those complaints you were having, which I'm sure are there, are kind of washed away by the fact that, holy shit, I just love this character so much, man.
Sorry, Abram, you said you didn't want to rush into the segment, but I'm just gonna throw it out there now. Obviously, this film won Best Picture. It also won Best Director for John G. Avildsen and Best Editing. It was nominated for Best Actor for Sylvester Stallone, Best Actress by Talia Shire, Best Supporting Actor Burgess Meredith, another Best Supporting Actor for Burt Young, Best Writing, again, Sylvester Stallone, Best Sound, and Best Original Song for Gonna Fly Now.
Did it win? It didn't win that. Oh, no. Dang, what beat it?
I should mention, Sylvester Stallone
so good.
Is among some great company in terms of people who were nominated for the same movie for writing and acting. He's among Charlie Chaplin and Orson Welles as the only three people to be nominated for writing and acting for the same film.
What film company to be a part of?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You mentioned editing, and that makes me think about this film uses montage quite heavily, and I think that this is near the gold standard of how to do a montage correctly, where to put it in the movie, how to cut it together. I think it sets up like the idea of the Hollywood time condensing montage where you take, weeks or whatever, or, however long and put it into the length of a song. It feels to me like the one that started it all. And I think it does it really, really well. Our montages at the beginning.
There may have been something called Citizen Kane a little bit earlier.
Yeah. But this one has that hype feeling. I think I get hype from the montage with the song is just incredible. And the way that it's cut together really flows in the montage. And it never really feels like there's any dead spots, which can come around when you're trying to make something that's conveying a lot of time passing. And when little bits of dialogue are thrown in there I like the montages in this film quite a lot.
Yeah. I mean, it certainly popularized like the training montage. If you go back to training montages, the best of the best are always the Rocky movies, and it started here. And I think it's
the franchise started here.
Yeah, the franchise started here, and it's the editing, it's the song, and it plays into the whole thing of making Philadelphia feel like a character within itself. You know, you have all the kids and stuff, and the shopkeepers who are like tossing oranges to him. They shot that guerrilla style, by the way, so that was just like a guy who threw an orange to Sylvester Stallone.
Oh, that's
like,
great.
He had no idea who he was. He's just like,
They
hey,
must have
have an
ADR'd
orange.
the Rocky thing then, because I think he says, "Hey, Rocky,
Yeah.
have this."
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is just, I think that's a great example of them just using footage that they had, and it's like, how can we make this just a tiny bit more like exciting? Hey, Rocky, have this orange.
It was John G. Elvidson like shooting out of the door of a moving van of just Sylvester Stallone just like running through Philadelphia. It was great.
That's great.
It works. It works very well.
I love that sequence. I love all of the training sequences, whether it's the traditional montage ones or it's him punching in the icebox, or the scene of him waking up at 4:30 and cracking egg after egg into the cup.
Oh my
I think
god! And
all
that
is
one
great.
shot, it's one take, and he just cracks like 5 eggs into the thing,
It's really great.
and spilling
knocks him
down his
back.
shirt.
Yeah.
Great.
I gotta say though, and I made the joke about him being a Mary Sue earlier.
Oh, boy.
I think one of the problems that I have with this film on a fundamental level is I don't believe the progression of Rocky from the southpaw, who is basically fighting nobodies, to Apollo Creed and going the distance with him.
Sure.
It tells a story of he went from nothing to this fight. And it's a really fun and compelling story. But when I really get down to it, I don't know if I believe it. And I think that's kind of my problem with the entirety of what I'm talking about in terms of the dropped threads or the character relationships that feel a little bit forced. I really love watching the movie. I love the experience of the movie. But when I think about Rocky as a character, when I think about him in an organic sense, not in the context of this awesome blockbuster, but in the context of these best pictures we watch with character motivation and growth and arc, I just personally, I'm not sure if I see that. And that so much of the film is contingent upon believing Rocky's progression there.
I mean, that's a good core point. I mean, it obviously comes down to how you're watching the movie, I guess, or how invested you are in the reality of the film, which is, of course, intended to be realistic. But I find it more an example of this is what passion and dedication can do. It can go to distance. It can achieve unachievable things. And this is the unreasonableness of the reality of film that I think I just sort of resign myself to when I'm watching something, which is why I don't really have a problem with Mary Sue characters in general. But I do feel like his passion and his knowledge as a boxer and his caring into the work he puts in makes it feel like he can do it, because you see that spark of passion in him from the very start.
Yeah. If I may,
You may.
I think I have my own little explanation for this, and it is we see it a number of times through the film. You mentioned it even, Abram, where Rocky is being interviewed on the news. He's punching like sides of beef in a freezer or whatever, and Apollo Creed's like in an office talking about how to play up the publicity of this fight. Rocky is out there training. He's waking up at 4 a.m. every day and jogging 6 to 8 miles or whatever upstairs. And Apollo Creed views this fight as like a publicity stunt. He's like, oh yeah, I'll offer up the heavyweight champion to anybody. He's not taking this fight seriously, and Rocky is. And I think that is the core as to why he can go up against the heavyweight champion of the world, and the core as to why the character dynamic and the theme and the plot of this movie works so well, because it is like the ultimate underdog story. It is a guy who has nothing, who's going to, just give it his all, because why wouldn't he? Versus like the top dog who's like, oh yeah, I'll slum it for a little while with some random guy from Philadelphia. I think that's why it works.
To me, this film is thematically a lot about the second chance. And I guess that's what kind of, I agree somewhat, Abram, that it is a little unbelievable, but if a movie tells me that something is true, I'm like, yeah, okay, it's true for the next 90 minutes. And that happens in this case. So with the idea of the second chance, it's like him being given that second chance by Apollo Creed and him doing everything he possibly can, including stuff that we don't really see, that, there's just no time to show 5 months worth of training in a movie. And so he's really, really, really going
5 weeks, isn't it?
Was it 5 weeks? It was 5 weeks. It certainly wasn't 5 weeks.
Yeah.
But just having that idea in the back of my head, I don't know if it was really ever said, but it was at least communicated that this was Rocky's second chance, that he had to capitalize on this, or else he would forever be just the bum. And so that was at least my understanding of his motivation for going and trying so hard, and an explanation for why he was able to do it in the end, even if we maybe aren't shown like exactly how he got there.
No, I agree completely. And I think that in spite of maybe the film not communicating the progression to me, the motivation was very clear. I love this movie thematically. I think that what Rocky represents, what Creed represents, his arc towards Creed is really great. Beyond the plot level, on a simple character level, on a character study level, as we're saying. And Timo, it is mentioned pretty explicitly in the context of the film when he's talking to Adrian the night before on the bed, being like, this fight is my first chance to not just be another kid from the neighborhood who didn't go anywhere, right? Yeah. And that stuff is all communicated so well. And that's when I think the movie is not only at its most fun, but also its best. And I just think that there was a way to tell Rocky that kind of stripped away some of the more nebulous elements, honed in on Creed, gave him more time, so we were building up somebody to root against. Because we root for Rocky. I love rooting for Rocky. That's fun. But what if I could root for Rocky and root against Creed? And you get to in that one sequence, which is so great, of him talking about, well, maybe I'll go put some radio ads in Canada. And Rocky his fists are covered in the blood of some random cow as he's beating the shit out of this in the icebox. Like, that's when the movie is so good. I just wish we could get a little bit more of that on a plot level to complement the thematic level.
Sure. Quick thing. Sorry, Tucker. I'll let you go. But I have a trivia thing, and I feel like you'll love this. They wanted to cut that bedroom scene. They were already over budget, and Sylvester Stallone's like, no, we can't cut this. This is like the core. This is like the final character beat for Rocky. And they're like, all right, fine, Sly. You get one take to do this, and that's the take that they used.
Shit.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's a good moment. That's a great scene. I mean, that's one of the more raw, emotional scenes, where I do think, in my perspective at least, the connection between Adrian and Rocky, while it might have that really uncomfortable start, it has a great lead up, really slow lead up, a really natural lead up, and then a really great progression throughout. Their relationship is very believable. And in that moment of her just laying there quietly and him opening his heart to her, that's a wonderful scene. And the fact that it's one take, I mean, I just kind of like that from the underdog perspective of, you got one chance, and he did it.
And it plays into the whole Sylvester Stallone is Rocky thing. He's like, all right, kid, you got one chance to do this, whatever, this core emotional moment, if you want to call it that, Sylvester. But he fucking knocks it out of the park. And it just tells you how much Sylvester Stallone cares about this character, cares about this film. Yeah.
And I think the one thing I was going to say before I got into my praise for that scene is about Apollo Creed. And while I actually definitely agree, I would love to see more of him. I think he's a really interesting character, and seeing him on TV and seeing him in these circumspect ways are an interesting way to sort of play up a character in the background. I still think that he works on the whole because of what I was saying earlier, it being so through Rocky's eyes. I mean, he knows this guy's the heavyweight champion of the world, but he's focused on his personal journey. The movie's focused on his personal journey. He's focused on his personal journey. Creed is a side element. He is the end goal, but he is, for all intents and purposes, a set piece, which is, I do think works for the film. I think there could be a more interesting story where they are given more balanced screen time. But the way that Creed plays into the theme, which I think is sort of the B-tier theme of this film of news coverage and fame, and how that plays into different people's minds, and the media is hyping up boxing, and the boxing is hyping up media, and everyone around the city is getting to know him, and the news anchor him on the TV and not knowing how to act, and just like, hey, it's my friend over there. Like, all that stuff plays into a really interesting theme that's not played into very heavily, but I think is really fascinating and sort of bolsters his personality. It shows off an interesting side of his personality, being uncomfortable on film, but then being confident in the boxing ring. Like, there's a lot of interplay between all of this, and I just bring that up as an interesting element of this film that I don't hear talked about very much. I mean, it's about the hype, it's about the journey, it's about the underdog story, but there's also an interesting narrative here of the corruption of fame, and how Creed is cocky about his life, and he's just kind of this businessman who's patting a dumb guy in the back for a little bit of clout. Like, that's a fascinating B story to be telling.
Yeah. I think it also. Oh, sorry. Go for it, Abram.
Well, it's communicated through two great side characters that we haven't really talked about yet, who are Mickey and Polly, who
Yes.
basically represent glomming on to
Mm-hmm.
Rocky when he
Yes.
finally
Yes.
gets something. And another one of the greatest scenes in the movie is when Mickey shows up to try to jump onto what Rocky has going, and then he just flips out, and you hear him screaming out the apartment building as Mickey leaves.
Mm-hmm.
There's just it's a great sequence to showcase how fed up Rocky is, and it's sort of a great turning point where he starts to come into himself a little bit more and be a little bit more externalized about what he's thinking and feeling. And I agree, Tucker, that it's such a great theme of the movie, and it's absolutely one of the reasons why it works so well. Because to circle back to something you said earlier, these quieter parts of the film are why it's so special beyond the boxing.
Yes.
It's a thematically dense movie, believe it or not. There's multiple themes being presented all throughout. What is it like living in the inner city? How does that change people? You know, the theme of fame, and how does that corrupt your friends, and how does it play in the media, and the idea of the second chance. Those are all real, live, bona fide thematic ideas that get explored thoroughly. I think the film is clear in its message, and it comes across to me as I watch it, and yet it's still, it fits that kind of Goldilocks zone of in between being very overtly thematic and me missing the point. It's right in there in where it's like I'm understanding what's going on, but you're not like telling me the theme. There's like not too many lines where they just say the theme as a line in the movie, which I appreciate.
I feel like we're winding down here a little bit, so I just want to rattle off some more trivia. If I can rattle off just how many injuries Sylvester Stallone and also Carl Weathers incurred while filming this movie. So while in the scene where Rocky, obviously the famous montage where he's Rocky running around Philadelphia, apparently he didn't stretch enough, because just like the character Rocky, he probably stretched like 10 to 15 seconds before going on a 5 to 10 mile jog or whatever it was, because Sylvester Stallone tore a ligament in his leg and had to be brought to the hospital in a wheelbarrow. I just love the idea. I just love the imagery of this giant man being like wheeled up to the hospital in a wheelbarrow. I love
probably
that.
in his Rocky costume too.
Oh yeah,
still.
absolutely.
Oh,
And, like,
easily.
in the gray sweats. Yeah.
They just didn't have a car that day, I guess.
I guess not. I don't know.
With the $1 million budget, they probably couldn't afford to have a car that day.
The van was full of camera equipment.
They had a wheelbarrow, though.
They had a wheelbarrow. They probably borrowed it from that guy who
Someone
threw
had
an
a
orange.
wheelbarrow.
Which
Which is something.
Yes, Tucker?
I was just gonna say the idea of that we were talking about earlier of Philadelphia being a character and Rocky's interactions with everyone around him is another reason I think this movie works so well. It's not super complex in the way that he's just treated like crap by literally everyone for most of the movie except for dogs. And I just like those smaller, relatively unimportant but really meaningful moments of him interacting with people standing on the street, or meeting the little girl who's hanging out with the teen kids and having that conversation, and even she treats him like crap, and like sort of everyone knows that he's the neighborhood bum and they don't really give a fuck.
He's not the nicest to her either. He's like, "You're gonna grow up to be a whore, little girl."
Yeah, no, that's definitely a weird line. But,
Yeah.
But I do think it puts him in an interesting position, that scene specifically, where everyone sees him as a bum, but he still like commands some authority because he's a big, strong guy, and he's got a little bit of knowledge behind him, and where he might feel insecure about himself in places, he's externalizing confidence that doesn't necessarily really exist, but he wants to fill this role. Like, the way that he interacts with the environment around him in the neighborhood, which, by the way, as Timo was saying, that visually it is a city, like the gray skies and the run-down streets, just the set design, and maybe not set design, but actual Philadelphia is phenomenal and capturing the energy. But I think that's one of the hooks that this movie has, is putting him in such an interesting place and seeing how he bounces off of that in all these different scenarios. That's what really got me invested in the character and the city and everything going on.
Speaking of hooks, sorry, I'm not done with my trivia.
Okay.
Speaking of hooks, he was landing some mean left and right hooks on those sides of meat. So mean, in fact, that Sylvester Stallone's knuckles to this day are completely flat from how hard and how long he was beating up those sides of meat. Like, he has no bumps. He flattened his knuckles beating up the meat so hard.
Yeah, we're all looking at our knuckles, and I'm like, how does that happen?
Yeah, I got bumpy ass knuckles. Let me tell you.
Yeah, me too.
And finally,
Sylvester, look at me. Look at these. Bet you wish you had them, huh?
oh, while him and Carl Weathers were filming that final boxing sequence, they actually were, they were landing punches on each other because they had a fun little interplay on the set as well. Like Carl Weathers didn't know that he was Rocky. He was playing Rocky, and that he was the writer. He thought he was just some like screen tester guy when he first auditioned. But Stallone suffered bruised ribs, and Weathers had a damaged nose, which is, funny enough, the opposite of what their characters got in the fight.
Great point. Yeah, it's a huge moment when his nose is broken, and a huge moment when Creed gets his wind knocked out of him by his ribs. Yeah.
Yeah.
We got to talk about that fight.
I want to talk
Let's talk about
too.
the fight, and then we'll wrap it all up.
It's electric.
Yeah, it's really good.
The fight is so great because it is so real and so raw when they are just beating the fucking life out of each other. And they're going like round for round, just slaughtering each other and going back to the corner and cutting Rocky's eye so it's not as swollen so he can get up and fight more. That is where I think, Timo, your kind of point about the understatedness of the film really comes through, because that is a huge sequence. That's a bombastic sequence. But what Sylvester Stallone brings to those moments adds so much underneath it. What he's fighting for that final bell, it is electric. Mm-hmm. It is fantastic. It is probably one of the best sequences in Quest for the Bestest that we've seen. I genuinely think that this is a cinema highlight.
I love the moment where Apollo Creed realizes, like, oh shit, this guy's like actually fighting me.
He's actually trying. What the heck? Yeah.
He's like, all right, let's fucking go. Let's do this thing. I love that moment because he's playing around with him in that first round. And then he gets knocked the fuck out, and Rocky's just dancing around. He's getting up like, what the fuck was that?
Yeah.
It's great. I love it.
Movies, I love it when a movie makes you feel good and you feel triumphant, and boy, do you feel really good when Rocky is socking it to Apollo Creed, and when that final round comes around and he gets, he goes the distance to achieve his goal. Really, one thing I wanted to add about the fight, I kind of love the wrappings around it, the way that it's like this America like bicentennial in it's in 76, 200th anniversary of the country. And like, there's all that frill about the fight, about it's the underdog story, and those small details really, I think, add to the emphasis and the feeling of the final moment. Just it's not super important. Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly, Tucker. It's not like super important or necessary, but it makes it better.
I think why this scene works so well for me, because as I said at the beginning, fighting, the boxing, those sequences, they're well made and they're great. They're very hype. Not the reason I like this movie. Honestly, that's like, I remember it as the boxing sequence, but it's not why I love this film, which is, an interesting perspective to have. But I think why it works so well for me is this amazingly edited and fought and acted sequence is placed into the context of what's around it, which is right before Rocky, like early morning, going into the empty thing and looking around this giant place and be like, you got my costume wrong. And like these little moments, and him afterward not caring about whether he won or lost because he went the distance. That's what mattered to him. And ending on his reuniting with Adrian. Well, I will admit, one of my biggest issues with this film is that I wish there was more at the end. I do like the sort of culmination and character ending moment of he's just literally gone the distance, is all crazy, and all he cares about is seeing his girlfriend again. Like, there's such a powerful emotional moment there that it end caps with a very personal thing. It starts right before with a very powerful emotional, personal thing. And in the middle, you get him going the distance. And I think it just works so well for everyone.
Tucker, you brought up the shorts, and I have to say that was actually a thing that the set painters or whatever got wrong. They painted his shorts the wrong color, and so he just had to like edit the script and be like, yeah, you painted Rocky's shorts wrong or whatever, because they just didn't communicate with the wardrobe department, I guess. And
it's interesting though, thematically, because that fits the idea that they don't really care who he is. Like he's just a guy. Like, they don't know what he looks like. He's not famous enough. So
again, it's the thing of like,
right coincidence.
This is making this movie is like Rocky Balboa. Rocky Balboa's fight is to Rocky as making this movie is to Sylvester Stallone. He's just like, he has to roll with the punches and he has to fight to get it done and stuff like that. I think that is perhaps the most interesting part of this is how it blends the film and like the real life story of getting the film made.
Yeah.
I don't know if anyone else has anything to say about the fight, but I feel like we should talk about Talia Shire a little bit, who plays Adrian, because she is the impetus for Rocky to like change personality wise and like open up so the audience gets to know him a little better. I love the ice skating scene where he's just like nervously talking. He's like, hey, here's all these things about boxing. Hey, you like the pet store? I like the pet store. Hey, I'll walk you home. You want to go home? Or hey, the ice skating rink's definitely open. Let me go talk to this guy. Hey, this guy, here's $20. Here, let us walk around the skate rink a little bit. Oh, the ice skates are bad for my ankles. I can't go ice skating. He just keeps talking, and she just like has this look on his face like, this guy's a fucking oaf, but I love him.
Yeah,
It's a great way to start the relationship.
The romance is, besides from that beginning, is nice. It's very cute, and it supports the story. The thematic ideas in the story pretty well. We are kind of running low on time, so I just want to jump ahead and figure out where this ranks, or
Okay,
at least here's some numbers, because we've had a lot of great discussion, and now let's put the money where your mouth is, and punch in that little funky number.
I do have one last thing to say. While we're typing in our numbers, always talking. I'm like Rocky Balboa. Sylvester Stallone still has the turtles. He still has Cuff and Link.
Really?
Yeah.
Holy
as of 2019, he still has the turtles.
They live a long time, turtles.
Yeah.
I know, but that's just the icing on the cake of like the reality of this story. He still has those exact turtles from the shoot.
Yeah.
And the dog was his actual dog. Oh my God. I love this movie so much.
Okay.
Man.
Okay.
All right.
Are you guys ready? I'm ready.
Yes.
3, 2, 1. Punch it in. Well, there we go.
There it is.
Pretty not super far apart. The average score is going to be an 8.55 rounds to an 8.6 from us, which means that the film will go in between The Bridge on the River Kwai and Gentleman's Agreement, two films that we were pretty hot on all around, and I think we're pretty hot on Rocky too. The point breakdown goes as follows. Starting at the bottom, I gave it an 8.0. Abram and Tanner both gave it 8.5s, and Tucker gave it a 9.2. So I think you could have seen those scores coming. Honestly, that does not surprise me one bit.
Now, one thing I would like to say, Timo, if I may.
Yes, do say.
I came into this review with the intention of scoring Rocky a lot lower, because I personally do feel like the film, beyond Rocky himself, is pretty flawed. I'm not crazy about the progression of the plot and a lot of the dropped character threads, because as great as it is as a character study, I think the film had a lot more to give on a plot level that it doesn't. But I think that Rocky, for me, is a great example of the ways that film as an art form can go beyond metrics of quality.
Go the distance, if you will.
It can go the distance. I think that the success of Sylvester Stallone as Rocky in the thematic material can make up that lost ground for me. And it kind of, for me, Rocky is something that complicated my quest scoring typically, because when I'm looking at, okay, point for point, how do I feel like these films stack up? I think that the quality of Rocky is lower than an 8.5. I might even argue significantly. But I think that the experience of the film, the feeling of the film, what was behind it, what was put into it, elevates it far beyond just that simple metric. So just an interesting thing to note about my own process scoring this movie.
Yeah, I think my score raised quite a lot while we were talking about it, just learning about the backstory and thinking and diving a little bit more into it. I still find that as a Best Picture winner, it really doesn't stack up to the ones that we think are really, really great, because there are, like you're talking about, Abram, the plot and those all elements. If Rocky had everything, it maybe would be very, very close to the top. But you could probably argue that for every single film ever made. If it was good on all fronts.
If it was better, it would be better.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. I do have
God.
I do have a little correction on the ranking side. It wasn't in between Bridge on the River Kwai and Gentleman's Agreement. It's actually in between Bridge on the River Kwai and Nomadland. So beating out the most recent Best Picture winner with the score of 8.6 puts it at place number 15 out of 49. So that's
I'd
pretty
love to see
far up
Rocky
there.
and Fern in a boxing ring.
Who would win? Is it Francis McDormand or Sylvester Stallone? Yeah.
I don't know.
Well,
maybe we'll get that.
man.
Maybe we'll get that in Rocky 10 or Creed 6 or whatever.
Creed 3 is being directed by Michael B. Jordan. So he's sort of following in the footsteps of Sylvester Stallone and taking the creative reins.
There you go. I mean, That seems right. It seems fitting. Let's
Mhm.
hit that spin wheel and
Yes.
get out of here because boy, oh boy, well, I think some of us have got some stuff to do. I think that's the long short of it. So let's pull that up.
I'm ready.
You ready, Tanner?
I'm nervous.
Me.
I don't know why I'm nervous, but I am. I is.
Okay.
Wheel, what's your deal? Give us a movie that makes us squeal. Is it on digital? Is it on real? Hey, Wheel, what's your deal?
And Wheel's deal this week is number 27. So, Mr. Tucker, list master, pull that baby up. What is the 27th
General.
film? Yeah, the list master general.
Devious face on this boy here. What
Yeah,
Mischievous
I'm
pull?
curious.
Mischievous look on my face because this is one of my personal favorite Best Picture winners that we are going to watch next week. This is, of course, the 1960 Best Picture winner. It is number 61 on all-time highest Letterboxd ratings. So out of tens of thousands of films, pretty high up there in the grand scheme of things. We're, of course, looking at a film starring Fred MacMurray, Shirley MacLaine, Jack Lemmon, directed by Billy Wilder. That oh so sweet man. We're watching The Apartment.
Wow. Okay, so we
God, I
will
love
have
this movie so much.
we will have a special guest next week too, because my friend and compatriot Ryan, we've entered into a blood bond, and he loves that movie too. So he's gonna come in and bring a little extra gusto. I do want to warn you guys. I am in a study class explicitly about Billy Wilder. So I know
my
a
God.
lot about what his stuff is, and I have textual readings and sources. So this might be our most educated episode of Quest
It's
to come up.
our academic episode.
Yeah, the academic episode. We need to think of another word for episode so that it can be the apartment academic whatever. All A's.
Oh, true.
Addition.
Addition.
Great one.
Episode.
Nice.
Ashu.
I'm really
Tell
excited.
everyone about this movie.
We're a couple of academics over here saying episode.
I am very excited to talk about this because I've heard so many great things, and just being in the class, I'm gonna get to read a couple chapters and some biographies about this. Doesn't sound the most exciting thing ever, but I think I am excited for it. So we will be back with all of our knowledge, all of our learning, and knowledge and learning, and a whole lot of opinions, because that's right. The quest for the bestest is all about what we think. And you know what? I want to hear what you think. I want you, as Apollo Creed does, walking around the ring at the beginning of the fight, to tell us what you think of Rocky. Let us know in the comments. This is a fan favorite of so many people. So many people love this movie, and we want to hear what you think. And if we like it, especially if we think it's a really good comment, well, we'll read it out on the next episode. So,
If it's one of the comments, we'll read it next episode, because that's usually how it goes.
We'll look through the phone book and find your name and bring you into the ring of
Yes.
the top comments.
And all four of us will beat you up.
Exactly.
okay, well, I cannot wait for this. It's going to be a great time. Thank you for joining me on this great episode of Quest for the Bestest, a real knockout movie, and maybe even a knockout episode. So we'll be back next time to talk about The Apartment. Hope to see you then. Peace. Hey everyone, Timo here. Just want to give a quick update at the end of the episode because we made a little mistake. The Apartment is not actually the right film for us to be watching next week. Our numbers were a little mixed up. The right film is Gigi. So even though it's just 1 year off, we'll be talking about Gigi next week. And do not worry, The Apartment will follow up that episode. The one after next episode, we'll be talking about The Apartment. All the great scholarly references, and Ryan's going to come in and chat about it. It's going to be a great episode. I'm really looking forward to it. But I'm also not looking forward to. I'm actually looking forward to talking about Gigi, watching the film, and I think you should be too. It's looking like it'll be a pretty good episode. So just to remind you, Gigi will be next week, and then The Apartment's making its real appearance on the Quest for the Bestest. You know, next week's going to be our 50th episode. It's pretty crazy. Thank you guys for sticking around this far, and I cannot wait to see what happens next.